I was halfway through Iowa when the snow really started coming down. My fingers were white-knuckling the steering wheel, the heater barely keeping up, and Christmas music played softly in the background like some cruel joke. 11 hours behind the wheel, 2 gas station hot dogs, and 1 blistering phone call with my mom that ended in, "Just get here when you can, Noah." Like I hadn't rearranged my whole work schedule to be home. I hadn't even planned to come this year, honestly. But it was my first Christmas back since Dad died, and part of me thought maybe that meant something. Maybe it would pull the family closer together. I don't know. Dumb thought, I guess. I'm Noah, 28 years old, mechanical engineer, and according to my family, the one who never needed much. That line has followed me around since I was 15 and figured out how to fix our old washing machine with YouTube videos and a busted screwdriver. Mom said it with pride at first, bragged about her handy little guy, but somewhere along the way, it turned into a justification. A reason to overlook me. A reason to expect more from me. To give me less. It started small. When I was 19, my room got converted into a guest room just for a little while after I left for college. The next year, I came home to find all my stuff boxed up and shoved in the attic. At the time, I didn't say anything. I figured, hey, I don't live here anymore. Makes sense, right? But my sister, Claire, who was 2 years younger and still living at home, had her room preserved like a museum exhibit. Same fairy lights, same pastel bedding, same shelf full of swim trophies she hadn't touched in years. And when I asked Mom about it once, she laughed and said, "Well, Claire's the sentimental one." As if I didn't have things worth holding on to. Still, I didn't push. I visited less over the years, birthdays, holidays, occasional summer weekends. But it was always the same vibe. Claire was the heart of the family, the golden girl. Cheer captain, marketing degree, married at 24 to a guy who sold solar panels, and called me bro every time he saw me. They lived 3 towns over in a fancy rental and always showed up late to family dinners, but were greeted like royalty. I, on the other hand, usually arrived early to help set up chairs, set the table, fix whatever had broken since the last visit. This year, though, this Christmas, I guess I thought it would be different. First Christmas without Dad. First Christmas where maybe they'd realize how much he held everything together. I was wrong. The house looked the same when I pulled into the driveway. Snow-covered roof, glowing reindeer on the lawn, the same handmade wreath Mom had hot glued together 10 years ago. I felt this weird mix of nostalgia and dread pulling up. I parked at the edge of the driveway behind a monstrous black SUV I didn't recognize. When I got out and grabbed my duffel, I noticed a giant paw print pressed into the snow. A few of them, actually. Big ones. Claire greeted me at the door with a half hug and a distracted, "Hey, Noah," like I was an Amazon delivery. She had a phone in one hand and a designer leash in the other. At the end of it, bouncing like it owned the place, was a massive golden doodle with a red velvet bow around its neck and a nose wet enough to slap a wall. "This is Bentley," she said, already turning away. "Mom's letting him stay inside this time." "Oh," I said, my eyes flicking around for Mom. "Nice to meet you, Bentley." Mom appeared a second later in the hallway, holding a wine glass and a folded blanket. She smiled, sort of, but her eyes didn't quite land on mine. "Noah, you made it." She reached out to hug me, but Bentley was between us, sniffing my duffel like it had bombs in it. "Hope the drive wasn't too bad." "It was all right," I said, glancing past her toward the hallway that used to lead to my bedroom. "Where should I put my stuff?" Her smile wavered. About that. I already knew. I didn't want to believe it, but I knew. "We've got a full house," she said lightly, as if that solved everything. "Bentley's a bit anxious in new places, so Claire set him up in your old room. He's got his crate and toys in there. It's the only space quiet enough for him to sleep." I blinked. "You gave my room to the dog?" "Just for a few days," she said, lifting the blanket like a magician. "You can crash on the couch. You've always been adaptable." Adaptable. Used to sleeping rough. Didn't need much. It wasn't the first time I'd felt like an afterthought, but it was the first time it stung like this. Because I had driven 11 hours to be here. I'd taken off work. I'd shown up. Again. And the dog had a room. I had a throw blanket and a couch with a spring that poked you in the ribs if you shifted wrong. Dinner was in full swing by 6. The table was set for 9. Claire and her husband, my mom, 2 aunts, an uncle, a neighbor couple who just didn't want to be alone this year, and me, squeezed at the end like an afterthought. Bentley had his own dog bed next to Claire's seat, complete with a little stocking and a monogrammed food bowl. I kept waiting for someone to acknowledge how ridiculous it all was, but nobody did. They talked about Claire's new yoga studio, her upcoming trip to Napa, whether or not she should start a dog Instagram. I nodded, chewed quietly, and tried not to let the frustration creep up my throat like acid. Later that night, around 11 p.m., the wine had flowed enough for my uncle to start telling old stories, most of them centered around how tough I'd always been. How I used to sleep in the garage during summer break, just for the breeze, and how I didn't complain even when my bike got stolen. He's a survivor, my uncle slurred, raising his glass. Probably be just fine if we dropped him in a ditch somewhere. Everyone laughed. Except me. I looked at Mom. She smiled like it was a compliment. I slept in my car that night. I didn't even try the couch. Something about lying under that thin blanket, listening to Bentley whine from the room that used to be mine, was just too much. So I slid into the driver's seat, reclined it, turned on the heated seats, and stared at the frost gathering on the windshield until I couldn't keep my eyes open anymore. At 10:17 the next morning, I canceled the mortgage autopay. They didn't know it, but they were 30 days from foreclosure, and I had no intention of warning them. The snow melted by the third day, but the frost in the house never really left. Not toward me, anyway. Every hour that passed just made the picture clearer. I wasn't family anymore. I was a guest who showed up uninvited, overstayed his welcome, and was expected to stay quiet, smile, and help with the dishes. I didn't say anything about sleeping in my car. I don't know why. Maybe because I didn't want to give them the satisfaction of knowing it bothered me. Or maybe because I knew, deep down, they wouldn't care. Mom would say something like, "Oh honey, you didn't have to do that." But there'd be no follow-up. No guilt. Claire would probably roll her eyes. And even if I did say something, what would it change? Bentley would still have the room. The couch would still be mine. On the fourth morning, I came inside to find Claire in the kitchen wearing one of my old college hoodies. The same faded navy one with the university logo that used to hang on a hook in my old room. I stared at it for a moment too long, and she noticed. "Oh, this? I found it in one of the attic boxes last year. So comfy, right?" She grinned like she'd borrowed a shirt from a roommate, not taken a piece of my life, and decided it was hers now. "Yeah," I said flatly. "Real comfy." Bentley barked from the hallway. Claire looked down the corridor and sighed. Ugh, his anxiety's acting up again. Mom says she might need to extend his CBD treats prescription. I nodded like that sentence made any sense at all. That day, I helped clear the driveway, fix a dripping faucet in the laundry room, and reprogram the thermostat, which somehow had been set to eco mode and was freezing the upstairs bedrooms. Nobody asked me to do any of it. Nobody thanked me either. It's just what I did. I was useful, not cherished. The breaking point didn't come all at once. It never does. It builds in layers, like snow on a roof, silent and soft until the weight gets too much and the whole thing caves in. It was Christmas Eve when the ceiling cracked. Mom had spent the entire day cooking. Well, directing other people to cook. She walked around the kitchen like a chef on a reality show, barking orders, pouring wine, and complaining that this year just doesn't feel the same without your father. The irony wasn't lost on me. She never once asked me about work, or my apartment, or if I'd been seeing anyone. But she did ask me to run to the store 3 times. Once for brown sugar, once for wine, and once because Claire didn't like the brand of almond milk I'd picked up the first time. By 7 p.m., the table was set again. Candles. Cloth napkins. Bentley had a special lamb and rice dog meal in a ceramic bowl with his name on it. Claire had brought him a new toy shaped like a gingerbread man, which he promptly tore apart in the middle of the living room, while everyone clapped and laughed like he'd performed a trick. There was an extra seat at the table this time. I assumed it was for me. It wasn't. Claire's husband had invited one of his coworkers, some guy named Brent, whose Christmas plans fell through. Brent was polite, friendly, even. But it didn't escape my notice that when it came time to plate the food, Mom handed him a dish before she handed me one. That she poured him a glass of wine and said, "You're like family already," while I stood there, mouth dry, still holding the serving spoon I'd used to stir the mashed potatoes. I sat at the far end of the table again, near the thermostat, near the draft. During dinner, Claire brought up Dad's will, just casually, like it was small talk. "Mom, did the lawyer ever finish sorting out the last bits of Dad's estate?" I froze. Mom looked up from her plate, swallowed her wine, and said, "Mostly. Just the house left, really." Claire nodded. "You're still planning to add me to the deed, right?" Silence. I looked up. "What?" I said. Claire blinked at me like I'd interrupted a private conversation. "What do you mean add you to the deed?" I asked louder now. Mom sighed, not even making eye contact. "It's not a big deal, Noah. It's literally the house Dad built," I said, my voice sharp. "With his own hands. He and I put in those floorboards. We rewired the basement together. You want to sign it over like it's a gift basket?" Mom finally met my eyes. "Claire's planning to settle here eventually. You live out of state. You don't need it." "I don't need it," I repeated, stunned. "You don't even like this town," Claire added, sipping her wine. "You always talked about getting out." "That doesn't mean I wanted to be erased," I said. "This was our home. Our dad's home. You can't just—" "Enough," Mom said, setting her glass down hard. "We're not doing this now. Not at dinner. Not at Christmas." Everyone at the table shifted uncomfortably. Brent cleared his throat and stared at his napkin. Even Bentley stopped chewing his toy for a moment. I pushed my chair back and stood. "Noah," Mom said, her voice firm. But I was already walking out. Outside, the air was bitter and sharp, but it still felt warmer than that room. I sat in my car again that night, staring at the dark house. My house, in some parallel world. I thought about Dad, what he'd say if he were here. He never would have let this happen. He would have laughed off Claire's entitlement, shut down Mom's justifications, handed me a beer, and reminded me I belonged. But he wasn't here, and they were giving away his legacy like it was leftovers. I opened my banking app. The mortgage was still under my name. Technically, the house was still mine. After Dad died, I stepped up to take over the financial responsibility. Mom had pleaded, said she couldn't cover it on her own, and Claire was saving for her future. So I covered the payments. Quietly, automatically, every month, like clockwork. Until now, I hovered over the autopay toggle and turned it off. They had no idea, but they would soon. What they didn't know, what nobody in that house knew, was that the mortgage had come up for renewal earlier this year, and that Mom had never bothered to reapply for a cosign. The bank had reached out to me, just me, and I'd restructured the loan under my name. Entirely. They didn't read the fine print. But I did. Still, I hadn't planned on doing anything with that power. Until that night. Until they looked me in the eye and said I didn't need it. That I didn't belong. The next morning, Christmas morning, I woke up in the car again, with stiff legs and a sore back. I went inside, washed my face in the guest bathroom, and walked into the kitchen. The coffee pot was half full. Claire was eating a cinnamon roll in her pajamas. She looked up, mouth full, and said, "You're up early." I didn't respond. Mom came in next, wearing a robe and slippers. She smiled weakly. "Merry Christmas, honey." I nodded. Nobody asked why I hadn't been inside last night. Nobody offered me a cup of coffee. Nobody even said the words. I went back out to my car, turned on the engine, and sat there as the warmth filled the cabin. And then I started planning. Because if they wanted to pretend I didn't matter, then they were about to learn exactly how much I did. And the clock had already started ticking. 30 days. And then everything would change. When I drove away from the house that Christmas morning, the roads were icy, the air was brittle, and I felt hollow in a way I couldn't quite describe. I didn't say goodbye, didn't hug anyone, didn't fake a smile, or play the part of the grateful son. I just packed my duffel, got in the car, and pulled out of the driveway without looking back. Bentley barked once from the front window. Claire waved absent-mindedly, not even checking if I saw her. The frost on the windshield matched the chill in my chest. I didn't go straight home. I stopped halfway, at some roadside motel with a flickering neon sign and curtains that smelled like old smoke. I lay in bed for hours, staring at the popcorn ceiling, letting the anger ebb and flow like waves. I wasn't just angry at them. I was angry at myself, too. Angry for thinking this year would be different. Angry for hoping they'd finally see me. And most of all, I was angry for how long I'd played their game. For years, I was the reliable one. The helper. The fixer. The one who never needed help, which somehow translated into the one who didn't deserve any. When Dad passed, I didn't grieve publicly. I handled the logistics, arranged the funeral, met with the lawyer, signed the mortgage papers because Mom said it would be easier. I stepped up while they fell apart, and somehow that made me disposable. I hit rock bottom not with a crash, but a silence. A slow dawning that if I disappeared tomorrow, they wouldn't notice. The next morning, I turned my phone off. I took a few days off work, told my boss I needed time to sort out some personal stuff. He understood. Always did. One of the few people who actually saw me as more than what I could do for them. I stayed in that motel for 3 more nights. Didn't turn on the TV. Didn't scroll through social media. Just sat with my thoughts, scribbled in a notebook, and started to breathe again. And then something shifted. On the 4th morning, I checked my email, not out of habit, but because I remembered something. A project I'd pitched at work a few months ago. An idea for an energy optimization model for commercial HVAC systems. It had gotten good feedback, but was shelved because it was too ambitious. But in my notebook, I'd sketched the outlines again. Sharper this time. Cleaner. Better. So I got in the car, drove home, and dove into the work. My apartment felt different when I walked in, like it belonged to someone else. Someone quiet, someone tired. So I opened the blinds, cleaned the kitchen, rearranged my desk, and sat down with purpose. For the next 6 weeks, I disappeared into spreadsheets, blueprints, and simulation models. I built a prototype, ran tests, hit walls, broke through them. I ate frozen meals, slept odd hours, and lost track of weekends. But I was building something that was mine. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was becoming someone I actually respected. Mid-February, I presented the model to my boss again. This time, I didn't pitch it like an idea. I pitched it like a product. A done deal. He blinked at the numbers, the projections, the precision. Asked if I'd worked on this solo. Yeah, I said. Had some time over the holidays. 3 weeks later, it was greenlit for testing. 2 weeks after that, the regional office flew me out to demo it in front of the board. I stood in a glass-walled conference room with a laptop and a laser pointer, walking a dozen men in suits through every step of my system. Every ounce of potential savings and efficiency. And when I finished, the room was quiet. Then someone clapped. And then they all did. They offered me a promotion on the spot. Project lead. 6-figure salary. Remote flexibility. Full autonomy. I said yes. The night after the offer came through, I sat on my balcony with a bottle of decent scotch and thought about Dad. Thought about how proud he would have been. Thought about how he taught me to wire a breaker box when I was 12. Thought about how he used to say, "Let your work speak for you." Mine was shouting. That should have been the end of it. I should have been content to rise quietly, leave the past behind, and build a new life without the people who never truly saw me. And for a while, I tried to do exactly that. But the thing about betrayal is that it doesn't just leave a scar, it leaves a pulse. A quiet thrum beneath the surface. And every time it beats, it reminds you of what was taken. It wasn't just a bedroom, or a seat at the table, or a line on a mortgage. It was my place in the family. And they handed it to a dog. It was late March when I got a call from Claire. I stared at the screen for a long time before answering. "Noah," she said, too cheerful. "Hey, stranger." "Hey," I said cautiously. "Mom said you've been hard to reach," she said. "Everything okay?" I resisted the urge to laugh. "Yeah, just been busy with work." "Well, we were just talking and realized we haven't seen you in a while. Thought maybe we could do a spring dinner or something." "Sure," I said slowly. "When? Maybe second weekend of April? I think Brent's free, and Mom said she might roast something fun. And Bentley misses you." I bit down on the inside of my cheek. "Hard." "Yeah," I said. "I'll think about it." She hesitated. "Also, quick thing. Mom mentioned something about the mortgage. She got a weird notice in the mail. Something about past due. I thought everything was on autopay." "It was," I said simply. I turned it off. Silence. "What?" she said. Not mad. Just confused. "Figured, Mom, or you could handle it now. Since you're planning to be added to the deed and all." Her tone changed. "Noah, are you seriously going to be petty about this?" "I'm not being petty," I said calmly. "I'm being precise. You can't just—" "Look, Claire," I cut in. "You all made it clear where I stood. I just adjusted accordingly." She hung up without saying goodbye. The next day, I got an email from the bank. Mortgage still unpaid. Final notice before legal action. I didn't respond. Then came the text from Mom. "Noah, we need to talk. Please." I ignored it. Then another. "I didn't realize how upset you were. I'm sorry if we made you feel left out." 2 days later, another message. "We're getting scary letters from the lender. Can we at least talk? You know I'm not good with this stuff." That was the moment I realized something. They weren't sorry because they hurt me. They were sorry because I stopped cushioning their fall. I didn't reply. I didn't explain. I just let the silence grow. And in that silence, I kept building. I invested part of my new bonus into a side project I'd been sitting on, a retrofitting company that helped update old homes with modern energy systems. A little homage to the work Dad and I used to do together. I hired a few contractors, built a clean website, filed for an LLC. By May, we landed our first client. A warehouse conversion downtown. Paid up front. Smooth process. Glowing review. By June, we had 3 more projects lined up. I stopped checking my phone. Let the guilt texts pile up. Let the foreclosure clock tick down. Because I wasn't their safety net anymore. I wasn't the fixer. I wasn't the couch crasher. I was the guy holding the deed. And in a few more days, they'd realize just how much power I really had. But I wasn't done yet. There was one more piece I needed to play. And when I did, it wouldn't just shake the house. It would split the foundation. And this time, I'd be the one sitting at the head of the table, just long enough to pull the whole thing out from under them. I waited until the foreclosure notice turned red. Red meant they were in default. Not just behind, not just late, default. It meant the clock wasn't just ticking anymore. It was screaming. And the best part? Neither Claire nor Mom had any idea what that truly meant. Because the house, the one they so casually gave to Bentley the dog and Claire's future settling down plans, wasn't in their name. It never had been. It was mine. Fully, legally, quietly mine. They hadn't read the refinance paperwork I asked Mom to sign months after Dad passed. She thought it was just a renewal, another round of me bailing out the household because you're so good with numbers, Noah. But what she signed, what I made sure she initialed on every page, was a complete transfer of mortgage ownership and cosigner release. She had no equity left, no power, no say, and now they were about to feel what it was like to be an afterthought. But I didn't want to just take the house. I wanted them to understand why they were losing it. So I planned something that felt poetic. It started with a phone call. "Hey, Manny," I said when he picked up. "Still got that real estate buddy you mentioned?" Manny, my friend from college, ran a construction crew now. We hadn't talked much since graduation, but he was the kind of guy you could call after a year and still feel like you just hung out last weekend. "Yeah," he said. "Luke, he owes me a favor or 3. What? I need someone discreet. Quick. Someone who knows how to list a property and handle the family complications." He paused. "You selling your folks' house?" "Technically my house." Manny let out a low whistle. "Damn, that kind of story, huh?" "You have no idea," I said. Luke called the next day. Professional, sharp, efficient. He didn't ask a lot of questions, just enough to get the ball rolling. I explained I needed the house listed privately for now. No big signs, no public showings. I'd give him the green light when the time was right. "Let me guess," he said. "You want it staged first. Spruced up before it hits the market." "Exactly," I said. He laughed. "Done this dance before. When do you want to start?" "Next month," I said. "But I'll need some eyes on the house before then." Quietly. "No problem. I've got a guy." While Luke got things moving, I made another call, this time to Miss Terrence, the probate attorney Dad had trusted for years. She was semi-retired now, but still sharp as a tack. I remembered her because she'd pulled me aside at Dad's funeral, handed me a card, and said, "If they ever try to twist things, call me. Your father was clear about his wishes." Back then, I didn't think much of it. But now I called. We met for coffee in a small office tucked behind a bookstore. I handed her a manila folder filled with every piece of paper I'd been quietly collecting for the past year. Mortgage statements, signed transfers, refinance documents, emails, bank logs, the text from Claire asking to be added to a deed she didn't know she had no claim to. Miss Terrence flipped through the folder like she was reading a thriller novel. When she looked up, her eyes were sharp behind those round glasses. "Well," she said, tapping the folder, "this is airtight. And they have no idea?" "Not a clue," I said. She leaned back in her chair. "You want my legal opinion or my personal one?" "Both," I said. She smiled. "Legally, you're golden. You can sell it, lease it, bulldoze it, whatever you want. Personally, I say let them squirm. Then crush them with it." I chuckled. "I'm working on it." From there, the setup became a slow orchestration. Claire tried calling a few more times. Left voicemails saying things like, "Can we please be civil about this?" And Mom's really stressed, "Noah." And my personal favorite, "You're not punishing just her. You're punishing all of us." As if I hadn't been punished for years. As if being invisible wasn't a slow punishment of its own. One afternoon, I got a message from Claire's husband, Brandon. a selfie of him standing next to a shovel in the backyard. The caption said, "Fixing the fence your dad never finished. Gotta keep the legacy strong, bro." I stared at it for a full minute. Then I forwarded it to Luke and said, "Let's start the walkthrough sooner, just in case they decide to fix anything else." Meanwhile, I got my side project, the home retrofitting company, officially off the ground. I named it Oak and Iron Systems. Dad would have liked that. We took on 2 new contracts in April, both historical homes, both in need of major rewiring and HVAC overhaul. My lead contractor, Nina, was a wizard with diagnostics. She helped me streamline our offer packages, and together we landed 3 more jobs by May. Money wasn't a problem anymore. Respect wasn't either. But closure? That was trickier, because part of me still wanted to know why. Why Mom so easily dismissed me. Why Claire never once stood up for me. Why, in a family where I gave and gave, I was the one left outside. And I knew I wouldn't get the answer in words. But maybe I could get it in actions. So I sent them an invitation. A formal one, printed on thick paper, gold lettering. Noah invites you to a family legacy celebration. No date, no address, just a line at the bottom, details to follow. Claire called within hours. "Is this a joke?" she snapped. "Nope," I said. "You'll get the next piece soon." "You're not being funny, Noah." "I'm not trying to be." Then came Mom's text. "What is this legacy thing? You're scaring me." I didn't respond, because the next piece was the real kicker. The save the date card. It looked like a wedding announcement. Fancy cursive, white envelope. Inside it said, "You are cordially invited to a walk down memory lane. Address, 304 Lilac Drive. Date, May 14th. Time, 2 p.m. Property walkthrough and farewell tour. Hosted by the sole owner." That date was exactly 2 days before the foreclosure would become a court filing. The final moment before the property would be legally processed. I sent the invites to Claire, Mom, and, just for fun, Brandon's work address. 2 days later, Mom left a voicemail crying. Not the manipulative kind, the real kind. Her voice cracked. She said she didn't understand, that she thought I was happy helping, that I was always so strong, that she didn't know I was hurting. I sat on the edge of my bed, phone in hand, listening to the playback with a blank face. Because that's what it always was, wasn't it? She didn't know. She didn't see. But now, she'd watch the whole thing crumble. From the inside. And when May 14th came, they'd walk through that house one last time. The kitchen where I learned to make pancakes with Dad, the hallway I patched when I was 16, the old closet where Claire stored my things without asking. And then I'd show them the final paper. The deed. Signed. Stamped. Filed. And the sale contract. Already prepared. Already accepted. All they had left was 2 weeks. And their silence. And soon, the front door key would be mine again. One turn. One click. And the whole chapter would end. But not yet. Not until they walked through the wreckage they created. Not until they felt the weight of everything they dismissed. And I was going to enjoy every second of it. May 14th arrived like a quiet storm. The sun was out, the breeze was soft, and everything felt too calm for what was about to happen. I parked a few houses down. Not out of shame, out of design. I wanted them to walk in thinking they still had the upper hand, that this was just some dramatic, awkward family meeting where Noah might yell a little, and then, as always, back down. Fold. Apologize for the tension he didn't create. Fix what wasn't his fault. Not this time. I watched from a distance as Claire's SUV pulled into the driveway. The same one she once called too narrow and outdated for anyone with a real career. She stepped out with her perfect blowout, designer sunglasses, and a leash in hand. Bentley pranced beside her, completely unaware that the room he'd been gifted was about to belong to someone else. Mom followed a minute later in her old sedan. She was dressed nice, too nice for a family chat. Cream sweater, pearls, soft makeup. She looked nervous, which gave me a flicker of satisfaction. Not because I wanted her to suffer, but because it was the first time in years she'd shown even a hint of uncertainty in my presence. I waited until they both rang the bell and found no one home. Then I stepped out of the car and walked up the drive. Claire turned, already irritated. "There you are? What kind of party is this supposed to be?" she asked, gesturing at the empty house. I pulled the keys from my jacket pocket, the real set, the ones I'd made after I changed the locks 2 weeks ago. "Follow me," I said. They followed me up the steps, confusion slowly blooming in their eyes as I unlocked the front door and pushed it open without hesitation. "Wait," Mom said. Why do you have keys? I didn't answer. I just let the silence echo as I stepped inside. The house was spotless. Luke's staging team had worked magic. New neutral rugs covered the floors, fresh paint made the walls glow, and every room looked like a magazine spread. It was still our house, but sleeker, detached from memory. The kind of place a buyer could imagine themselves in without the weight of family history. Why does it look like a showroom? Claire asked. Because it is, I said, walking into the living room. Mom stood by the kitchen island, slowly realizing something was wrong. Noah, why are there brochures here? I picked one up and handed it to her. It was a property listing. 304 Lilac Drive, 3-bed, 2.5 bath, fully modernized, price upon request. Claire read it over her shoulder and turned pale. Wait, what is this? This isn't funny. I finally looked them both in the eye. I told you this was a legacy event. And it is. This house was part of our family legacy. Until you both made it clear I wasn't part of that family. Mom's lips parted, but no words came out. You told me I didn't need a bedroom. That I didn't belong. That it made more sense to give the space to a dog. Claire scoffed. Oh my God, are you seriously still mad about that? That was months ago. You gave my room to a dog. You gave my dad's legacy to a fantasy about you settling down someday. And you tried to add yourself to a deed that never had your name on it to begin with. I didn't know, Mom started. No, you didn't ask, I said. None of you ever asked. I pulled a folder from my bag and laid it on the counter. It contained everything. The title, the mortgage papers, the release forms, the timeline, the refinancing under my name. You signed this, I said to Mom, tapping one page. I thought that was. You thought I'd just keep paying while you handed the house off like a party favor. But you signed full ownership over to me last year. This house has been mine. I paid for it. I maintained it. I protected it. And now I'm selling it. Claire's face twisted. You can't do that. I already did. You're actually going through with this? Selling Dad's house. You mean the one you were planning to claim like a souvenir while I slept in my car out front? That house. Bentley barked once, oblivious. Mom stepped forward, trying to soften her voice. Noah, this isn't what your father would have wanted. I took a breath. That line almost got me. Almost. No, I said. Dad would have wanted you to see me. I let that sit. Let it land. Let her process the years of things she didn't notice, didn't appreciate, didn't care to ask about. Then I handed her one last piece of paper, the sale agreement. Signed. Executed. Closing in 12 days. Claire snatched it from her, scanned it, then threw it back on the counter. You're unbelievable. This is revenge, not justice. No, I said calmly. This is consequence. They both stood in silence. No more comebacks. No more gaslighting. Just quiet recognition that this time, I wasn't backing down. I turned and walked them toward the front door. There's a storage unit nearby, I said over my shoulder. Everything that mattered, photos, heirlooms, boxes of Dad's stuff. I moved it there. You'll have 2 weeks to collect it before I close the account. You're actually kicking us out, Claire muttered, like the idea was too ridiculous to accept. I opened the door for them. You already kicked me out. Years ago. Mom stepped outside, shell-shocked. Claire followed, dragging Bentley behind her, who paused at the door and looked back at me like he wanted to stay. I closed the door gently behind them. Then I walked through the house one last time, room by room. The kitchen where I used to make pancakes with Dad. The den where I spent hours fixing things he broke just to teach me how to repair. The bedroom that stopped being mine the moment they saw me as convenient instead of family. And I felt something crack, not like breaking, but like pressure releasing. By the time I locked the door and handed the final keys to Luke, I wasn't angry anymore. I was free. 12 days later, the house sold for $714,000. I took the money, paid off the remaining mortgage, donated a chunk to a local trade school in my dad's name, and used the rest to buy a home of my own, not just a place to sleep, but a space that was mine from the ground up. And when people ask me why I walked away from my family, I don't always tell them the full story. I just say, sometimes you have to leave the house that raised you to build the home that will never throw you out.